In most fictional media franchises, somewhere along the lines we always end up on a topic of a higher power or higher powers that started the universe, a higher power or higher powers that governs or guides the universe, a pantheon of gods that are fading out of existence or have re-emerged into the modern age, bridging the world between myths and legends with the modern world, or a god that wants to destroy the universe or may have some malevolent purpose. Many of the gods from various mythologies and religions have become some of the most popular characters in fictional media today, such as Diana in DC for Wonder Woman, the Babylonian gods also in DC such as Nabu in relation to Dr. Fate, Khonshu and the Egyptian gods from Moon Knight along with Thor and Asgardians in the case of Marvel, just to name a few. With Thor Love and Thunder around the corner, we'll be diving into some topics around some aspects of the Marvel universe that will be introduced in the film. Starting with this video taking a look at the depiction of God and gods in fictional media. But we aren't just going to be dealing with Marvel in this video though. So, first and foremost, what is a god, as in commentary? Well, the Merriam-Webster states that a god is a being or object that is worshipped as having more than natural attributes and powers, or one controlling a particular aspect or part of reality. Now, what is God, as in capital G? In monotheistic thought, God is usually viewed as the supreme being, creator and principal object of faith. God is usually conceived of as being omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and omnibenevolent, as well as having an eternal and necessary existence. God is often held to be incorporeal, with said characteristics being related to conceptions of transcendence or immanence. Now, before diving into the full fictional media breakdown, let's pull up some other concepts and definitions that are important for a complete understanding of what we are going to cover. Just stick with me here. The first term is theism. Theism generally holds that God exists realistically, objectively, and independently of human thought, that God created and sustains everything, that God is omnipotent and eternal, and that God is personal and interacting with the universe through religious experiences and the prayers of humans. Now, the next term is deism, which holds that God is wholly transcendent. God exists but does not intervene in the world beyond what is necessary to create it. In this view, God is not anthropomorphic and neither answers prayers or produces miracles. Common in deism is a belief that God has no interest in humanity and may not even be aware of humanity. The next term is pantheism, which holds that God is the universe and the universe is God, whereas panentheism holds that God contains but is not identical to the universe. And finally, just some extra stuff, some monotheists believe that there is only one God, and may also believe this God is worshipped in different religions under different names. The view that all theists actually worship the same God whether they know it or not. I know that was a bit of an information dump, but it is important for what we are going to cover in the video. If you guys are enjoying the video thus far, then I hope you consider leaving a like on the video and even subscribing for more breakdowns from a Christian perspective. But let's get into the depiction of gods in fictional media. Starting with Marvel, the gods of Earth are extra-dimensional races of beings who once existed on Earth in its distant past and are now or were once worshipped as gods or deities by different cultures on Earth. It is known they are descended from the primeval Earth goddess Gaia, and over the years have separated into tribes or pantheons, each pantheon connected to worshippers separated on Earth by the geological, cultural, or environmental boundaries. The exact origins of the gods of Earth are lost in antiquity, but it is known that every culture has its own, often contradictory, myths on the creation of the universe. What is known is that soon after the creation of the Earth, the demiurge, the embodiment of the planet's potential biosphere, seeded it with its own life essence, producing the elder gods known as Set, Chthon, and Gaia, among others. Most of these deities degenerated into demons, forcing Gaia to have to sir a son Atom to destroy most of them, while the few that survived were driven away to nether realms. Atom and Gaia may have fathered the later pantheons of gods, but this is unrevealed. In the MCU thus far, we have been introduced to only two sets of gods, which are the Norse gods and the Egyptian gods. Throughout the Thor movies, it was established that the Asgardians are a race of extraterrestrials similar in appearance to humans, possessing both highly advanced forms of technology and magic upon which their civilization is built upon. They are a brave and powerful warrior race whose passion for adventure is their religion. I got that from the Marvel wiki, that is not my wording. And their reputation as one of the mightiest races in the universe has earned them that respect and fear from other races. Their interactions with humans over 1000 years ago had a strong influence on Scandinavian culture, with Asgardians becoming the template for the region's Norse mythology. Throughout the Moon Knight series, we follow the Egyptian gods pinned under the Enneads, which consisted of Anubis, Atum, Bas, Geb, Hoth, Horus, Isis, Khonshu, Osiris, Sekhmet, Shu, Chart, Nephthot, Nephius, Nut, and Ammit. Now, the actual term, the Ennead, refers to a group of 9. This was actually addressed in the very first episode of the series.
Of the Ennead? The Ennead? You know, like the super group of Egyptian gods, you know, you got Horus, Osiris, Tefnut, Shu.
Stop, please. If this is some weird audition to tour guide here, the answer's still no.
I know what I'm trying. It's actually crashing to here. But what I'm trying to point out, I'm not trying to slag off marketing, but there's been a major blunder because they've got 7 gods here and the Ennead has 9.
I fired 2 of them for being late.
In the show, they were only able to act in the mortal realm once they had human avatars. It is stated that they were once worshipped by humans in ancient times, but as time went on, the Enneads isolated themselves from humanity and refused to intervene in human affairs. As a result, the Enneads became mere legends and myths in Egypt and Wakandan culture throughout the passing millennia. In the series, we see that these gods do in fact have immense power over various aspects of the earth. Even Asgardians are able to do some incredible things throughout the MCU. Now, in Moon Knight, we see the gods take on their forms and manifest into the physical realm once they are granted that access by their host or they are residing in the pyramids of Egypt, where they are deemed to be most powerful. In any other circumstance, they will be completely invisible without a host and no one would see them, and their powers are limited, such as Khonshu only being able to control the wind of the night without a host.
It's all right. That's all he can do without your help. Come.
But he is able to control the night sky once his host gives him permission to do so. Permission and submission of a host is a very important thing throughout the show and in relation to the depiction of gods in general when it comes to fictional media. But we shall put a pin on that for now. But jumping over to the DC side, the gods are supernatural beings considered divine or sacred, controlling one or more spheres of power: war, love, wine, dreams, death, etc. Most of the so-called gods of Earth were originally mortals whose power were obtained when the god wave spread throughout the universe. The gods have usually several of their attributes better than those of mortals, particularly longevity, as some gods are thousands of years old. The God Wave was stated to be a cosmic force of divine energy that created the speed force, the quantum force, and the emotional spectrum channeled by the guardians of the universe. The emotional spectrum is what gives all lanterns their power. When the wave of power swept across the cosmos, it left a seed of divinity wherever it touched, and became responsible for creating various pantheons and gods and divine entities on various planets. As the energy wave spread, it eventually reached the edge of the universe and rebounded, making a second pass that created the potential for superhumans on planets such as Earth 1,000 years from the present. It is also stated that at the dawn of creation, magic existed in its raw form within the plane that would become the sphere of the gods. It was promising and pure. It surrounded the forming universe. From that energy, the first magical being shaped herself out of the cosmos. The sphere of the gods is host to most, if not all, of the gods and immortals that exist outside the multiverse. The sphere of the gods is composed of 8 realms that each act as a polar opposite to another realm within the sphere of the gods, such as the shining New Genesis, which acts as a polar opposite to the fiery Apocalypse. Each of the realms within the sphere of the gods is directly connected to at least one reality within the Origin of Worlds, which greatly affects the universe and development of the universes that they are connected to. Across DC film, animated, and TV media, we have been introduced to all kinds of pantheons and gods. We can see Zeus, Ares, Poseidon, Diana, alien gods, new gods, gods of speed, and even mortal beings being transcended into a kind of god status. In the DCEU, the old gods, also known as the Greek gods / Olympians, are said to be an extra dimensional race of powerful beings who were worshipped as gods by ancient Greek, Roman, Amazonian, and Atlantean civilizations. They occupied a realm known as Olympus. During the War of the Gods by Ares, all the gods, including Zeus, were killed off. In the Young Justice series, we can look at Nabu, who in this iteration is simply just a son of Vandal Savage, who became a Lord of Order and empowers those who possess the Helmet of Fate and become Dr. Fate. You can check out our Christian superheroes in a Superpowered World video for more info going in on that, as Nabu is actually the Babylonian god of art, writing, and vegetation, and the Dr. Fate in this series is supposedly a Christian. So that's all the info I deemed relevant to state in relation to the gods in DC and Marvel media. If there's anything you think I have missed out, then let me know down in the comments, because I mainly use examples of shows and films that I have watched or comics that I know about. Now, let's take a look at God in the DC and Marvel universes, and we would start off with identifying who is the uttermost supreme being of each. In Marvel, the supreme being is the one above all. In our Spider-Man Meets God video, we covered him extensively, so let's just roll some clips from that video. In another comic, being one where the Fantastic Four meets the one above all, is simply described to be the one that sets the universe in motion. He was depicted as the legendary Jack Kirby writing on a page, bringing things in the comic from sketch to panel. Continuing along with what is stated on the Marvel Comic Wiki, the one above all is the ultimate source of life and creation and the architect / creator of the multiverse and everything that exists. The one above all has stated that its only weapon is love. The one above all is the source of all that is good and is a being of limitless compassion and light. While very rarely seen, as the mystery intrigues the one above all and it prefers to watch and experience its creation through many eyes, it has sometimes interacted directly with mortals through different guises. In the MCU, currently, the supreme beings are the Celestials, who are credited with creating the universe through a constant destruction and rebirth cycle. The story of the Celestials and the universe creation is actually one that flips Revelations 12, where instead of God and his angels winning the battle, Satan and his rebellious accomplices win the war and banish God and his angels. We covered that in our first video we uploaded on this channel, taking a look at Marvel's creation story. But with that information regarding the comic and MCU context of Marvel, it was safe to say that at some point that the one above all closely aligned with deism, since he exists but does not intervene in the world beyond what was necessary to create it. He is not anthropomorphic and neither answers prayers nor produces miracles, along with not having any interest in humanity and may not even be aware of humanity. However, with recent comic lines such as the Immortal Hulk, Marvel canon has been shifting away from the deistic approach of the one above all to a more theistic approach, especially with someone like Al Ewing at the helm of that ship. On the DC side of things, it isn't as clear due to the retconning that occurred during the Justice League Incarnate storyline, so it has been up to theory and interpretation. But prior to that, a fictionalized version of Yahweh was credited as the creator of the multiverse, known as the Presence. Now, to an extent, the Presence is still the being above all beings, to which I would play a clip by another YouTuber explaining it. But in older comics, the Presence also had three forms known as the Hand, the Voice, and the Source. But in the Justice League Incarnate storyline, it is simply reworked to all being separate entities that are just a small aspect of God. But all references to Yahweh has been taken out and retconned to being known as the light that started creation. In the new DC canon, the multiverse was made by Perpetua, who was one of the hands and was given such power by the source, only being limited to 3 rules. She defied the rules, which led to her eventually being defeated after one of her sons noticed she was defying the rules and alerted the cosmic beings to pass judgment on her before Perpetua's full plan was enacted. I do plan to cover the story of Perpetua eventually from a Christian perspective, because it is an entire topic by itself. But now I'm going to roll a clip by Educated Midgey 1337 which explains God in the DC universe.
But even though all these beings I've named are very powerful, there's still one amongst all. The entity who's truly the strongest in all of DC, God. So many people have their theories on who God is and how he operates in the DC universe. Some see it as the writer, some see it as the endless.
Also minds. For example, like Neil Gaiman.
But I have my own theory on this subject, and the evidence is pretty hardcore. So as I've discussed earlier, I have mentioned the presence is the source, but the presence is literally just an emanation of a truer being. He said it himself, the Phantom Stranger has said it. Actually, when the Phantom Stranger said it, he said he was an aspect of God himself. So there's definitely a higher up. Now, when we look back into Lucifer, when the presence is talking to his son, Lucifer, he explains to him with an analogy, even though he's in the void, you're still part of my plan. And he suggests this by saying that this place is a piece of him, it's an aspect. And that's not the only instance when the overvoid suggests to be an aspect of him. We have author statements, we have it being said it's his unconscious. It's pretty consistent, it's an aspect. But where do we go from there? The overvoid's an aspect of God, but now what? Well, it's been hinted at multiple times that reality is a dream. At least a dream in perspective of this higher up entity. The Phantom Stranger has said it many times. The very concept of death has implied that this is all a dream drummed up by someone. Hal Jordan talking to a girl has said everything is based off God's imagination. When the Phantom Stranger merged with the Spectre, they both claim that they're thoughts in this divine mind. So we know reality is just God's imagination. We know the overvoid is an aspect of God. Where do we go from here? Well, in Sandman Overture, they explain how the universe and all these things in the DC are all ideas from God's mind. They as well explain how the mind of God is the void, which would then correlate to when the presence says the void is a piece of him, because it's his mind. And that would also correlate to the other statement saying DC is a dream projected by God's imagination. So the overvoid is the canvas or the mind where these stories or the ideas are put off. And if this evidence isn't hardcore enough, I found something that will blow your mind. In the Spectre issue 10 run, when the Spectre merges with the overvoid, he essentially becomes omniscient. Keep in mind, this is the Spectre's strongest form. With this omniscience, he claims the divine presence surpasses everybody in creation. But that's not all he says. He also says he contains everything, because the presence contains these ideas in his mind. And right after, he tells Parallax that everything's just an idea drifting through the void, because existence is contained in God's mind as an idea that is dreamed up by him. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the DC Universe explained. Thank you very much.
Now that is a lot, to say the least, and we'll get into it in a little bit. His video is linked in the description where he breaks down multiple different aspects of the DC multiverse. But I cannot discuss the supposed depiction of God in comics without the interpretation that the page is God. In both Marvel and DC, at some point the interpretation that the page is God was the most dominant discussion when it came to identifying who is the most powerful being in the respective universes. After all, it is just a piece of fiction, right? On DC's side, during the Final Crisis run, Grant Morrison is quoted in an interview with IGN saying it's a notion that the white page itself is a void, and in the context of the DC universe, well, that's God, or the source. In the white page or the void, anything can happen. Everything is possible. As I dug down closer to the very root of the activity I find myself engaged in as a career, I was thinking, what is the basis of the comic book story? What actually is it? In the case of comic book stories, it's the war between the white page and ink, and who's to say the page might want that particular story to be drawn on it? What happens if the page is a bit pissed off at the story that's drawn on it? So I thought of the page as God. The idea being that the overvoid as well called it Final Crisis, of the white page as a space is sort of God. On Marvel's side, Prior to Al Ewing's influence on Marvel cosmology, the One Above All's first noted appearance was in 2004's Fantastic Four number 511, where they meet the One Above All, who appeared as Jack Kirby, literally drawing out comics, taking things from sketch to panel. There has always been the allegory that the true god of comics is the writers and fans who influence what goes on the page, the ones who make the decisions of where the story goes, or who is the main villain, and what is the central theme of the comic or overarching story. After all, isn't that not the supposed power of God? Yeah, not in the slightest. In doing research into fictional media for the purpose of these videos, I have come across so many different interpretations and opinions of what or who God is, whether it may be from atheist writers, supposed Jewish writers, professed Satanist writers, and even Maltheist writers. A writer's worldview and philosophy is crucial to know because their work is nothing more than a reflection of what they believe. Some prominent writers say God is a racist killer. Some say God is a figment of over 1 billion people's imagination, and some even see themselves as God because they are the only ones in control of their life, along with all kinds of other claims. But who is God? Because here's the thing, we are bombarded with so much different perspectives of God or what other people view God to be, and sometimes we can't even define him for ourselves without having to look up in the moment an article by a scholar or Christian leader. I want you to think about that for a second, because don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that ensuring that you are on the right path of thinking by looking up scholarly articles is a bad thing. But that dawned on me while typing this script because it was easier to write out the twisted definitions of God by non-Christians than it was for me to formulate my own. I legit had to take a little break to ponder why that was so. I mean, let me know if that is an experience that only I have or if any of you can relate to it, because I would like to know. So let me know in the comments. But in answering the question, I'll reference a question asked under the It's Not Just Fiction video, which asks, what exactly is the difference between believing in angels, Christ, and God, and believing in Glycon, the serpent god? A comment that fits right into the subject of the video but doesn't quite answer the actual question. My response was, the Christian God can be found in history, the truth, and in reality. When compared to other beliefs such as Glycon, in this case it can't entirely be proven through history, the truth, and in reality. Every belief or religion has an origin, but in some cases the origin may be historic but is not grounded in reality and can be simply disproven. There are many accounts that point to the historical accuracy of Christ's existence along with the truth of the Bible, along with it actually being rooted in reality. But the same cannot be said for all the other supposed gods and deities. If we were to take a look at it from a biblical perspective, there are many scriptures that speak against the worship of other gods in detail. When it comes to angels, I'll check out this video by DLM Christian that explains it far better than I can. But overall, the difference is believing in what has been proven and can be backed up and has stood the test of time and relentless critiques and dissecting by many different people versus believing in something made up and portrayed and claimed to be true by a small group, which has been disproven. That's my personal definition of why I believe in God and the Bible, and the one I am able to relate to people. And when I say origin, I do not mean that God has an origin, but rather the origin point of the Christian faith and the canonical books of the Bible can be proven in history, the truth, and reality. However, that does not actually answer the question, who is God? So let's stop taking detours and answer that question, backed up with some Bible verses, of course, because what is a Christian breakdown without some scriptures? First and foremost, God is spirit. We cannot see him with our naked eyes as we can see the phone or device you are using to watch this video, but we can feel him and know of his existence. John 4:24 says God is spirit, but those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. God is the creator of all things and operates outside of his own creation. God created time, space, and therefore is beyond time and space. Everything is sustained by God and through God. God has no beginning and he has no end. end. We can look at Genesis 1:1, which we all know says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth," which details the beginning of the universe, not the beginning of God, because God doesn't have a beginning and he doesn't have an end. Hebrews 1 verse 2 to 3, which says, "But in these last days he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, through whom also he created the world. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power." Along with Revelations 1 verse 8, which says, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty." God is one, but he exists as three persons: God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit, which is backed up in Matthew 3 verse 16 to 17. God is omnipresent, all present. He is not an object somewhere in the universe, but he is everywhere all at once. God is omnipotent, all powerful. God is sovereign over all of creation. It is not that God has power or exerts force. He is power, yet unlike most earthly power, he cannot become corrupt. It is by this power that in him we live and move and have our being. God is omniscient, all-knowing. This means that God knows every fact there is to be known. 1 John 3:20 says, "For whenever our heart condemns us, God is greater than our heart, and he knows everything." The amazing thing about trying to pinpoint all aspects of God, which we can't, along with the challenge of talking about God, is that God's nature is so far beyond our own that we can only catch a glimpse of God's glory. It is impossible to use human minds to understand everything about God, or to use human language to capture everything about God. So pulling it back to that feeling of not being able to formulate my own answer to who God is on the fly isn't because I didn't know, because if I didn't know, I think that would be a much bigger issue than Marvel and DC twisting the Bible, honestly. But it was rather a moment of trying to formulate all the things I know personally, which isn't much, and through research and Christian teachers in relation to God in such a way that the delivery can reach all viewers while still encapsulating the fullness of who God is. Because in this modern age, especially during this TikTok generation that we are living through, a lot of people have so many different perspectives and views on God that is not God at all. It is their own perceptions that they are projecting onto God and stating as fact that that is what God is. I mean, it blows my mind how boldly some people are able to use their projected facts onto God and claim it to be who God is. Because God is not just a force. God is not just a concept. God is not just a being roaming the universe. God isn't just a being that started the universe and doesn't care what happens after. But God is the all-present, all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-loving creator of all things, who cares and loves you. Not because he has to and must, but because that is who he is. That is who God is. I know that segment is ripe for refutation, opinions, and whatever, so feel free to leave any and all thoughts in the comments below, but make sure to do it with no swearing. If you swear in your comment, it's not going to appear. There's a YouTube filter on my comment section. But now that we covered who God is, let's cover gods from a Christian perspective. By simple definition, gods are any supposed gods other than the one true God. All the supposed gods do in fact tie back to demonic entities, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. In the Bible, some of these divinities took the form of images, others were mystical. Some Israelites became involved in idolatrous worship of such gods. The book of Acts even records attempts to deify humans. There are endless passages in the Bible that can be highlighted when looking at the Lord's distaste towards false gods, especially when it came to the Old Testament and the Israelites. The origin point of all gods can be traced back to the same place, ancient Babylon. Now I know some consider that entire thing to be inaccurate because of, I don't know, whatever historical facts or such. I've came across other information from other Christian YouTubers that I like that is vetting against that whole origin of paganism timeline story. But for now, we did discuss it in depth in our Apocalypse Explained video, which you can get the link for in the description below if you would like to know the supposed origin of paganism. Now, the hurdle with relaying this aspect of the discussion of gods is that the beliefs of most ancient societies is deemed as mythology. It's just a bunch of myths and tales. A common comment recently from people who see the Bible as just another mythology or work of fiction from the ancient times that managed to survive and hold relevance into our world today is that we are getting so worked up about one piece of fiction taken from another piece of fiction. But evidence shows that the Bible is not just a piece of fiction. However, I'm not going to get into that in this video. But I mention it because the Bible pinpoints that idols and false gods are demons. Let's break it down. Deuteronomy 32 verse 16 to 17 says, "They stirred him to jealousy with strange gods. With abominations they provoked him to anger. They sacrificed to demons that were no gods, to gods they have never known, to new gods that had come recently, whom your father had never dreaded." The passage is very self-explanatory. It associates pagan gods with demons and warns God's people not to be involved with idolatry. Leviticus 17:7 in the New King James Version says, "They shall no more offer the sacrifices to demons, after whom they have played the harlot." Here, these demons are other gods worshipped by the surrounding cultures. Again, demons are associated with pagan gods in this passage as well. In the ESV, demons is stated to be goat demons, as you see on screen. I mean, it isn't a coincidence that demonic activity is associated with religions that embrace a multitude of gods and goddesses. A desire to have supernatural contact with the spirit world often focuses people on supernatural power apart from the power God offers through a relationship with Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit. Matthew 4:9 says, "And he said to him, All these I will give to you, if you will fall down and worship me." The he is the devil and the him is Jesus Christ in the scripture. The devil desires to be worshipped and attempts to get that worship through a plethora of different ways, including the use of false gods. Overall, those who worship false gods are willingly or unwillingly pledging their allegiance to evil spirits who desire to usurp God's rightful place in their hearts. A lot of fictional media, writers, actors, and directors serve false gods, like openly profess to being led by false gods, and it's not just a gimmick or an Illuminati confirmed the moment for free press. They genuinely believe in these things. We touched on this lightly in our video titled "The Issue with Saying Magic and Witchcraft is Just Fiction." Every director, actor, and writer has their own belief of personal philosophy that is implemented into their pieces of work in some way. But when some of these guys are writing about demonic entities possessing people and such, for some it's just a story, but for others it isn't just a story. But surprisingly vast majority of them, it isn't just a story. It's actually part of their reality. By part of their reality, I mean the foundation of the story, minus the part where an alien can shoot laser beams out their eyes. Don't get it twisted. I have not heard or seen any fictional media pioneer say that they believe that something like Superman is real. I haven't heard it. That's all I can say. I haven't heard it. This is why for the upcoming Thor Love and Thunder movie, which we will discuss deeper in a future video, I really want to know just how exactly Marvel is going to deal with the entire pantheon of gods. And for those wondering why we care, here's the answer to that.
Some amazing question, or just for all of us, really popped in my head that day as being fans or creators and artists and creative people that make comics and make movies and make all sorts of things. So, you know, when he was saying that we look to these superheroes to get our moral code and our integrity and our courage, we actually use them as a basis. And then it made me think, well, if that's the case, and it actually is, like pop culture is actually the new mythology. So if that's the case, like what a crazy power that any of us wield I had described it to him as it's almost like you're doing an ongoing series of the Bible that people are like getting this moral code from. And
through these comics, these humanists, atheists, and God haters, and really Maltheists when we talk about it today, are ultimately pushing narratives that will put doubt into your heads, doubt into young people's heads over and over again as Satan continues to use them to attack the mind. And we need to bring every thought captive to the obedience of Christ.
But many will continue to say there is no intended meaning or intent behind it, as it's just fiction. But anyways, that's it for this video. If you watched at this point, then consider leaving a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more fictional media breakdowns from a Christian perspective. Let us know any and all thoughts in the comments below, but keep it civil and Christ-like and no swearing. It will not be posted because YouTube will filter it out. But as we end off, remember, these videos are not to tell you what you can and cannot watch, as that's your decision to make, but it's so that you no longer blindly consume.